Welcome to Voices of Adoption, where we share unique perspectives, actionable advice, and meaningful stories of birth parents, adoptees, adoptive families, and other members of the adoption community. I'm Donna Pope, Executive Director of Heart to Heart Adoptions.
And I'm Nathan Gwilliam, founder and former CEO of Adoption.com.
Together, we've been part of thousands of adoption journeys over the past 25 years, and we're so glad you're here.
Let's begin today's conversation.
Well, welcome to Voices of Adoptions. We are super excited to have Gene Trowbridge here with us today. And Gene is an experienced podcaster himself. In fact, he's done like about 50 podcasts so far. And Gene, tell us just a little bit about the podcast that you do.
All right, Donna, thanks. Yes, we do a podcast that's called Hey, Am I Adopted? Which is what Emily said to us when she was about 4 years old, ran into the house and asked that question because I guess some of the kids on the street were teasing her or whatever. And we've always told Emily and Amy that their whole family's adopted. All four of us are adopted. So somewhere along the line, Emily decided she wanted to do this podcast, and she's in her 40s. I kind of thought she'd drop it after 1 or 2 years, you know.
She didn't.
She didn't drop it at all. And so a couple of years ago for Christmas, we gave ourselves the present of having the finances to start the adoption podcast. So we interview only people that are adopted. That's our goal. My wife is adopted too, but at about 2 years old through a second marriage, but she still has some of the same quirks that we all of us adoptees have, right?
So let's go back and tell your story a little bit. And again, Gene was adopted, and you're going to tell us about what age. And then he and his wife faced infertility and chose to adopt Amy and Emily. And so they've got multi perspectives of adoption here. So start, Gene, with your personal story.
Well, my personal story, from what I know, is I've known all my life that I was adopted. My parents didn't shared that with me right away, so I knew all that, but didn't go much farther than that, except for it didn't go much farther than that. So when I was 16, my mother, who was an interesting person, gave me a present. And inside the present were her apron strings, if you could believe it. That's the type of quirky one she was.
A little quirky, but okay.
Wow. And a set of papers. And they were the adoption papers. How
old were you again?
Well, at 16, I got the papers. And what I found out is that as an infant, 4 to 6 weeks old, they were going to place me with my folks. And I got sick and my dad got sick. So it was about a year. I was about a year old when they actually physically, the Catholic Social Services placed me with my folks, but I was almost 2 by the time the adoption was final. And from what I understand, my birth father was a minor and actually was in the service in Korea, and he didn't have the authority to sign off on the papers himself. So they had to get the commanding officer of the unit over there to sign off, and that took a while. So my mother, from what I understand, and that's a story too, my mother was 19, and he was probably home from service, and they had a date, and I was the result of the date, and she being a good Catholic girl, they sent her off to a home for unwed mothers. She came back and left me there with the Catholic Social Services. And my grandmother was involved in the Catholic Church very, very very deeply, and knew the people there and knew that my mom and dad couldn't have kids. And so she actually coordinated the introduction of the Catholic social service to my parents. And so they adopted me. And I went along, and that was totally fine. God, I've got so many stories. I went along, and one of my fears, Donna, which is not different than anyone else's, is I feared that if I followed through, and one of the things that was interesting on the very bottom of the adoption papers, I was 16, so these papers were 14 years old, was the name of my mother, her address in St. Paul. And so from that moment, I knew I could probably do some searching. But I had two concerns. Number one, I didn't want to hurt my adoptive parents by doing that. And I was a little worried about that. And I certainly didn't want to show up on on my birth mother's doorstep and say, hi, I'm here, and have, her 19 kids and her husband say, who is this? I didn't want to ruin anyone's life. So I didn't. I thought about it. I didn't do much about it. And then when I was 65, I figured, 18 and 65 is 84. So maybe she's either gone or I'm not going to ruin her life. And both of my parents are gone. So I'm not going to hurt them. And so I went on Ancestry, and I got a click from someone in International Falls, Minnesota, way up in the Iron Range. And I followed through on that click and sent whoever that was copies of my adoption papers and a picture. And I said, I wonder. And nothing happened. Crickets for 2 months. Finally, I get an email from this girl, and she said, why don't you call me? I've got a surprise for you. Okay. So I called. And lo and behold, my mom was dead. My biological mother was dead. But I have 6 half-brothers and sisters.
6 of them?
Just 6 of them. And there are 4 girls and 5 girls and a boy. And they didn't know anything about me. But Uncle Jimmy, who is now 87, Uncle Jimmy, the younger brother of my biological mother, they went to him and said, do you think this is true? Is this really someone? And he said, well, I was young. I don't remember much, but I remember Joanne went away and then she came back. And he said, I think I knew about this, but it was nobody's business, so I never mentioned it.
I want to go back and ask you a question. With this kind of quirky gift that your mom gave her, with the apron strings and your adoption papers, I'm not sure what she meant by it. I'm cutting the apron strings. You go off on your own is sort of the feeling I get.
I think that was it. But now, see, this was 48. This was in 64. And my mother, I think, was bipolar before anyone knew what that was. And my father was suffering from post-traumatic war, and they were just weird. They were alcoholics. They just, who knows, just a perfect place for me to be as an adopted person with all whatever things are going on in my mind. Just the perfect home for me to be in. The one thing that I don't know if you listened to the episode where I talked about Mary Beth.
No, I didn't get that one. No.
Well, this was an exciting one. I was in 3rd grade. And once again, I knew I was adopted. And I came home one day from school, and here was a little girl in my house, my age, brown hair, brown eyes, just like my mom and dad. And they said, here's Mary Beth. We think you need a sister, and we'd like to adopt her.
And you were in 3rd grade then?
I was in 3rd grade.
So that 10 years old, 9 years old?
Whatever. So, okay. And that didn't hurt my feelings at all because, an adopted only child has got many, many things going on in their head. And so I thought this was okay. But the way it worked probably wasn't the best. We shared a bedroom. We went to school. The next day, she went to school with me. She was in the same classroom with me. We were in Catholic school. She wore the same uniform that I wore. And sometime, and I can only guess how many months it was, I got up to go to school. We were all going to go to school together, Donna. And my dad said, that Mary Beth didn't feel well and she wasn't going to be going to school. So I went to school. And when I came home that night, she was gone. Everything about her was gone.
Wow.
And my parents said that it wasn't working out. And she went back to the adoption place.
Wow.
So I got really upset. And I remember the next day I stayed home from school. And the next day I came home, I can visualize myself. I was in my little red maroon overcoat, my stocking cap, and I had my suitcase. And I walked in and said to my dad, if she can go back to the agency, I can go back to the agency.
Yeah.
And he said something that I've used all my life. He said, well, that may be a good idea.
Whoa.
If it's a good idea today, it'll be a good idea tomorrow. Why don't you take off your clothes and we'll have dinner? And the next day it wasn't such a good idea. But sometime close to that, I said to my mom, can we go visit her? And one of the coolest things that was ever said to me, which might be true, but I don't think so. She said, no, Mary Beth went back to the agency, and the agency home was right alongside of a railroad track, and she was hit by a train and she's dead.
Whoa.
So now we're 16 and I have my papers, and the wonderful woman that she was gives me her apron strings and my adoption papers, but I still couldn't do it. I couldn't do it to them. So I had to wait till they were gone and then followed up. But the exciting thing about my siblings is my wife and I went on a tour. We got on a plane and we went to Minnesota, and we had dinner with the 4 of them that live in Minnesota. And this is a picture I will send you. They loved me. It was just great. Then the 2 that went to Scottsdale, there had been a divorce, and they went to Scottsdale to live with the dad. And the 4 stayed in Minnesota and lived with my biological mother. And the 2 in Scottsdale didn't know why I was looking for them. Thought maybe I was trying to find some money, and they were not pleasant at all. But 4 in Minnesota were pleasant. But Donna, there were no shared experiences. We talked a little bit and we shared some things. And now I only talk to the one who contacted me in the first place. I don't have anything in common with any of them. And although I thought it was fun, but I've got this picture that they put together with the 6 of them and my mom in the middle. And I look more like my mom than any of them do.
That's interesting.
And then I guess I did learn then toward the very end that when I was about 2 and the adoption was finalized, my dad was injured in the war and died. So I didn't know anything about my biological father at all. I know his name, and I know that, but nothing at all. And like I said, my mom is dead. So that's my story, and we couldn't have kids. So after trying and trying and trying, one day I said to Kay, we were in California, no, we were in Minnesota. I said to Kay, I'm adopted, you're adopted. Why don't we look at that?
Yeah.
So we got on the phone and we called the Catholic Social Services, and we were down there that week meeting with Eve Furseth. And she said, yeah, we'll look into that. Funny, in there, Donna, we could adopt one. The Minnesota Catholic Social Service had a philosophy that parents without kids should get a child.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But just one. We got to California and we thought, well, let's see if we can find another one. They said, oh, if you have an adopted one, you're a priority because we can't have an only child there. We need to put someone with another adopted child. So that process was, 3 or 4 months. It was just amazing.
So I've got a question for you. I mean, that's quite a difference in philosophies between the two places.
Isn't it?
If we go back to kind of your feelings, you had this sister or potential sister come to you, and then you had her be taken away. And it left enough of a hole in you or a longing in you that you got really mad. You were very mad.
I was very mad. And now in later life, with all the photo albums that I have, there's not a picture of her. She was, my parents totally erased her from that. And I often wonder, now that we have 2 girls who were adopted and it was important that there were siblings, what would my life have been if I'd had a sister, especially with some shared experiences. Wow.
Well, and that's so interesting. And your parents didn't really tell you the truth. You don't even know what the truth was. And
no idea. I don't know why it didn't work. They said it didn't work. It worked for me. I don't remember anything but maybe it didn't. Maybe it didn't work. Who knows?
What's also interesting about that is there was some deception there and there's some quirkiness there, but the loyalty that you had towards your parents remained.
Yeah, and that's it's really funny because the day I graduated from high school, I put everything in my car and I left. That was it.
Didn't go back?
It wasn't. I went off to college, and it wasn't good for a long time with them. And at the end, it wasn't good with them. It was, of course, they had their problems. I mean, I took them to court once to get control of them because they were totally. My mom was sick and in a wheelchair, and my dad was a drunk. And I went to court. And I'm living in California, and they're in Minnesota. He's in jail half of the time, and I went to court to become their guardian. And the judge actually was cool. He said, I'm on the stand and I'm proving all this stuff. And he said, you're 3,000 miles away or 2,000 miles away. You can't do this.
Right.
They had an attorney and I had an attorney, and a social worker and the healthcare services from the city. And he said, I'm going to give you a half hour to go out, and their attorney and your people are going to come up with an administrator. I'm going to grant your wish that there is an administrator to take care of your parents, but you can't do it. You can't do it. That was a great decision. It really was a great decision. And so it all went pretty much downhill from there. But as far as being adopted, I've listened to so many stories now, Donna, and I always ask the questions I always ask as you've listened to them. And are there any addiction issues in your life? Because I find you probably find that too. It's a common thread. And I don't. But Amy, who we haven't talked about at all, my daughter, Amy.
Let's jump to the part of the story. You and your wife couldn't have children. There was infertility there. You've both been adopted. You've had those shared experience, and you decide to adopt. You adopt one from Minnesota, and you got another one from California.
3 years apart.
3 years apart. And did they love each other?
I think they did. I think until Amy went off the deep end and became a problem to live with, I think they did. We talk about her quite a bit in the family. And I do know that she was a challenge. We all loved her. I think she loved us. She just couldn't deal with, well, what's the word? Rejection, abandonment. She just couldn't deal with the issue of being adopted. And she went into drugs at 14. She died from drugs at 34, something like that, about 17 years, and a lot of care facilities, a lot of jail, a lot of stuff, and just very, very, very difficult. I even took her to Minnesota once, took her to Minnesota to take her to the Catholic Social Services because she was making noises like she might want to find her mother. And I thought I would support her in that. So we flew back and we went with the interview. And after the interview together, she went in and talked to the nuns, and she came out and said, "Yeah, I want to do this. Don't you want to do this, Dad?" I said, "No, I'm not ready to meet my parents, but we're doing this for you."
Mm-hmm.
And so we had the application. We filled out the application. I wrote the check. I gave her the application and the check and the envelope. And I said, "All you have to do is write the letter. If you write the letter, we'll send it in and we'll see what happens." Because the letter had to go from Amy to her mom. And her mom had the choice.
Mm-hmm.
And Amy never wrote the letter. And I talked to her about it. And her answer was that she couldn't take the chance of her mom saying no again.
Yeah.
That's what killed her.
We hear that sometimes, don't we? That fear of rejection, that feeling of rejection the first time, the fear of rejection the second time.
You know, and I read a lot of books, and somewhere along the line they said that the rejection of the initial rejection when you're adopted at, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks old, you don't remember that, but it makes an impression on you. And that impression is with you forever. And I pretty much buy into that.
The interesting thing is that I talk with women all the time that are placing their children for adoption. And if you were to ask them, "Are you rejecting your child?" they would scream, "No, no."
Giving them a better life, giving them a chance for a better life, right? And, one of the things I've found from the people we interview is when the adoptee actually finds their mother or father, more often than not, the first thing that comes out of the biological parent's mouth is, "I've been waiting for you to find me." And I get so upset with that. If you're waiting, why don't you get out there and find her? You couldn't really be waiting that long unless you had fears that you'd ruin their life, or the same type of fears that I had. I don't buy that. I don't buy that you've been waiting for that all my life. What else are you going to say? But maybe that is the truth. I don't know.
We're finding more and more that keeping the door open so that this finding each other, or maybe never fully losing each other, that perhaps it will bridge that feeling of rejection gap.
I hope so. I know what Kay and I did. Well, Kay did much more than me. Every year she sent a current picture, and if we had moved or anything, our current address to the St. Paul Catholic Social Services, just in case. Because you never know, there's health things. Maybe there's a biological mother who needs a kidney.
Yeah.
Why would you there's all sorts of reasons why. Donna, you're right. You should keep that door open. And we did the same thing in California.
So have you gotten responses back from the biological parents of either one of them? Neither one of them.
Neither one of them. And they were both, my biological mother was still in high school, and Emily's was in high school. Amy's was in high school. Emily and Amy's were both juniors in high school. So, they had good reasons. They're both certainly they're from Catholic families, and that adds a little bit to it. But they both had good reasons, and hopefully, as you said, the thought might be I can give them a better life. Hopefully.
The challenge is that part of better life for most adoptees is a connection still, even if it's a loose connection, some sort of a connection to, so that they don't wonder, was I rejected? Did they not care about me? Now, and you as an adoptive parent feel that longing to have that connection with these biological parents for various reasons. And
No, I have all sorts. I have the Kay and I have the double whammy of being the adoptees and adoptive parents. And it is something, I guess, that I'm a little older now. I'm 78, and Kay's 79, and we put a lot of this behind us. But I'll tell you a story about Kay that is in one of the episodes. That Kay was adopted through a second marriage when she was very, very young, and in those days, early 50s, Michigan, her biological father couldn't pay support, so he's out of her life. The biological mom has a new husband. It's too much pressure. We can't do that. Don't ruin the family. Don't upset things. So Jim is out of Kay's life. But in a couple instances, he or the knowledge of Jim popped back into her life. And one day, I think it was about 1994, we were living in California, and Jim lived in California, and Kay just knew enough that she thought she could find him. And so she went to the yellow wall phone. Out. One of the best days of my life. She went to the yellow wall phone, called information for Jim Couchon in Canoga Park, got a number and called, said, "Dad, this is Kay. I live in California." It was on a Thursday. And on Saturday, he and his current wife were down at the house.
Wow.
25 years, he turned out to be Grandpa.
Oh.
He was Grandpa Gravy. He taught Emily how to make gravy at Thanksgiving. He and his wife, Joanne, who actually knew Kay's mom, were friends, and we'd sit at all the holidays. It would be Jim, Joanne, and Evelyn on one side of the table, and Amy us on the other side of the table. The only grandpa my kids ever had.
Wow. That tells you about the importance of not cutting off those relationships, doesn't it?
And Evelyn did, and that was probably the right thing in those days, but he didn't know that Kay had graduated from high school. He didn't know that she had graduated from college. He didn't know she was getting married. He wasn't invited to any of those things. And I think that's the way it was. Okay. What a shame.
Yeah, that's a shame. That's a shame. So you adopted, tell us a little bit more. Now, Amy, she struggled, and she got
for
it.
17 years, struggled for 17 years. And, she was living on the streets in Santa Ana, which is not good. And she was in jail a couple times. And the last time she was in jail for what was going to be a year, and she got out early, kind of unbeknownst to us, and got out on Wednesday and went back to her homies. And on Saturday morning, we got a call that she was in the hospital, and we got there, she was gone. She went to party, and she was out of shape. And I guess she had an aneurysm, a brain stroke. It just emulsified her brain, and she fell to the ground, and she was gone. And we had signed up for organ donors, or she had signed up. She was kind of a crazy girl. She had a will, she had a medical directive, and she had signed up for organ donors because I guess in the program, there are 3 ways it's going to end up. And she was ready for one of them. And the agency in Orange County came. She was in the hospital for 3 days waiting for them to find recipients because, her body didn't have a real good history of organs that people would want. But they did find 3 people for kidneys and liver. And I went over there when they wheeled her into the operating room, and I waited for her for it to be over, and I saw the guy who took the 3 boxes onto the helicopter to take them off to wherever they go. I saw that, and that's I guess what she wanted. And we got a letter from the agency there that all 3 of the 8 organs had taken, and at least at that time, it's been 15 years now, at least at that time, 3 people were living because of that.
That helps, doesn't it? That helps.
Yeah, it was very difficult. But at the same time, Don, I was relieved. I called the person who had been the caregiver for Amy for many, many years. And I said to him, David, I feel like I'm relieved. Should I feel guilty about that? And he said, well, think about the last 14 or 15 years you've had. Think about how else this could have ended for her. She could have been in a dumpster. She could have been kidnapped and taken to Mexico. She's a beautiful blonde young girl. Who knows? But at least we know. At least we know. And I think there are probably a lot of parents out there who don't have that ending.
Yeah. So how did Emily deal with all this? No, how did Amy? No, Emily.
Emily. Well, Emily for a long time was mad because she thought, Amy should just get over it. And Emily lived in the house with her sister when Amy was back and forth with us. And that relationship was different than Amy and Kay's and my relationship. And I think it was nasty. I think it was mean. And I think that it hurt Emily quite a bit. Emily has loving things to say to her about it now, but every once in a while she says, Amy was really a jerk and was really difficult. And
yeah,
I hate being around her. Okay, fine.
So tell us the story about the podcast. You started out by saying that she came home one day and she was saying, they asked me this.
Yeah, she said, they asked me, hey, am I adopted? And we said, sure you are. Okay, so then she went out and played with her friends. And that was about it. She always had the story that she's adopted. It's really funny because Emily and I are quite a bit alike. It doesn't take a 10-minute, 15-minute conversation with me for me to speak up and say that I'm adopted. It's right in the forefront of my life. What's your story, And she is the same thing. Everyone knows she's adopted. Everyone knows we're all adopted. And so she lived with that, and then she lived with Amy, and then she came to me, and something was happening in her, I'm sure. And she came to me and says, let's start a podcast. She listened to some podcasts about things, not about adoption. And I said, well, okay. And that's Emily. She always wants to start some things. She always has a full plate, but she doesn't follow through. Okay. So I figured, well, good. 2 years she'll forget this, but she never forgot it. And you know what the outcome of this is? And you haven't, I don't think, unless you've listened to the last 1 or 2 episodes, you don't know. Emily had been married and got divorced. There were no children. And last April, she married another man who lives in St. George, Utah. And they're both in their mid-40s. And they right now are going through a program called Foster to Adopt.
Mm-hmm.
Emily has it in her mind that she's going to adopt someone. And David is all for it. They have a little disagreement about he wants infants and she wants maybe someone a little older, but and they want girls. But she's into it, and she's listened to all these stories, and it's really taken her. I don't know if it's going to happen. I kind of think she's a little old. And once again, I don't think she's going to follow through because she just doesn't follow through. She's awfully busy with her life, and who knows? It's been about 6 months, and I don't think she's done all the things that she wants to do. And this last week I was talking to her, and she said that in the foster to adopt program, the mother or father can come and take the kids back.
Yeah. Or
And she doesn't want that. So she says, maybe I'll follow through with the Catholic agency, because when you're when you're a product of the Catholic adoption, no one's taking you back. That's all over. That you give up your rights. So I don't know what she's going to do, but that's kind of funny, isn't it? Wouldn't that be if we were
3 generations?
But she has some of the things. What did Amy have? Amy had the characteristic of resentment, abandonment, things like that. Emily has a problem with her birthday. Emily always has to have a major to do on July 4th. And I've run into that a few times also, where people, and I don't think she's upset about her birthday, but I think her birthday has more to it than just a birthday. Haven't gotten that out of her, but I watched that. And Emily's attitude toward, if her biological mother walked up to her and said, "Hey, I found you," Emily says she'd say, "Great, nice to meet you. I have really good parents. Bye."
Mm-hmm.
And she would have been happy that the mother gave her up because it seemed to work.
Yeah.
I don't know if she's just blowing smoke at me or not when she says that. I don't really know.
But she hasn't taken real steps to try to reunite with her biological parents.
Oh, no. And I've asked her time and time again if she's like, we gave her an Ancestry subscription 1 year for Christmas, and she's never followed through.
Interesting.
And I had it, and it took me a while to follow through, but I did. Maybe about 4 years.
Yeah. We call that ambivalence, that feeling of, I want to, I don't want to, I want to, I don't want to, that back and forth. And it seems like anytime we have things that are highly emotional to us, we feel ambivalence, and it's hard to make the next steps to do it. And it sounds like she struggles with that.
Let me tell you the best story we've had. You've had a lot of great stories, but we had a story and I actually met this man, and I invited him to come on. He was in his mid-30s, and he was overweight, and he had a cholesterol problem. And the doctor said, this might be hereditary. And he says, well, I'm adopted. And the doctor says, we've got to find your father because it probably comes from your father. Do you know this story yet?
No. Well, I've heard similar stories for sure, but go ahead.
He went out to find his father, and it was complicated because his father was a parish priest.
Oh.
And the parish priest got tied up with a young lady. They had a baby, and the parish priest knew a family that was looking to adopt and arrange the adoption. Now, this man has found his biological father. Biological mother wants nothing to do with him. The biological father says, I've waited all these years for you to find me. Isn't this great? And he found his biological brother. Not only did they do it once, they did it twice. And the priest found a different home for the biological brother, and now he's found them. Isn't that interesting?
That's really interesting. So did he get the information he wanted to from his biological father?
It wasn't cholesterol. It wasn't hereditary. It was something else. So he's solved it. But he wrote a book, and the book is called Sins of the Father.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting book. And this priest, finally, after the second one, the story is he went to the bishop and said, bless me, Father, for I've sinned.
Multiple times.
And the bishop says, well, you have a choice. You have a choice. And you're either going to go off to the service and be chaplain or you can leave the priesthood. And it was during Vietnam. So he went off to be a chaplain and he got the Purple Heart.
Wow.
He came back and he was the chaplain at, now I'm having a senior moment. What's at the big cemetery in Washington, D.C., the military cemetery in Washington, D.C. He was the chaplain there until he could retire. And then he went off and got married.
So, Jean, as we're sort of winding up here, tell me how you would advise, and I'm going to ask you to advise all members of the constellation. How would you give advice, particularly right now? Let's start with adoptees. What advice would you give to adoptees?
My advice would be not to be afraid to try to develop the connection that you talked about earlier. And there's always two parties that you have to be afraid for, I think, maybe three. You have to be afraid for yourself. Like Amy, for another rejection. You have to be ready for that. But I think you have to be afraid for the life of the biological parents and the life of your adoptive parents. I don't think every adoptive parent would have given me their apron strings and my adoption papers. I don't think everyone would have done that. So I think you need to buck up and decide for yourself if you want that connection, and then don't be afraid and go for it. But I think you can also buck up and say, well, I don't want that connection. I'm looking at Emily. Doesn't. So, but I think that's the first thing you have to deal with. It. If you know you're adopted, okay, the skeleton is in the closet, the elephant in the room is the connection. Deal with it.
What about biological parents? What advice would you give them?
The biological parents that have contacted me and listened to my podcast and would like to tell their story are all women, and they have unbelievably difficult stories to tell, and there's no question that giving up their babies was the right thing. So, if it's the right thing, don't feel guilty. Don't feel guilty at all. Do it. I think there's sometimes there's not necessarily the right thing, and you might have to worry about it. We have a friend who went to college with Kay, and she got pregnant, and she gave up her baby, and she's been afraid for years. I don't know if she's afraid anymore, but I know back then she was afraid for years that someday some little boy is going to knock on the door.
And she didn't want that.
She didn't want that. She'd gone on and had her own life, and there was no physical abuse. There was no real reason why she had to give up the baby other than she was a Catholic girl without a husband, and I think her parents probably forced her to it. So that's fine. But I think for biological parents, and I don't know why more dads, well, maybe I know why more dads do it, because maybe the biological dads don't even know.
Yeah, sometimes that's the case.
Totally possible. And isn't that a shame?
Yeah. And so, and you've especially felt that with your wife and that situation there.
What a loss that was for all those years. But when it came back, it was really terrific. And, no one's going to hear this, but my master password is Grandpa Gravy in some years, some numbers after it, because he taught Emily how to make gravy at Thanksgiving.
So, somebody might sneak into your house now and know the password.
So that's interesting. Yeah, I think you had to deal with it. I know in my life, outside of the issue with Mary Beth, it really wasn't an issue for me for a very, very long time, and I had no reason to look for the connection. And even while my parents got bad and got sick and died, I still didn't need that connection. But somewhere along the line, I did. But I still waited long enough till I was pretty sure she'd be dead.
Interesting.
So I solved my fears. I thought she'd be dead and my parents were dead. So now I'm the only one who has to deal with the connection. And so I was ready to do that.
So finally, what advice would you give adoptive parents?
Well, it's pretty exciting. You know, to say love them like your own isn't really the right. You kind of do, but it's really special. I mean, I remember the days when we went down to the agency and picked up our babies. I remember what they were wearing. I remember the problem we had with one nun because we didn't have the right car seat. And I remember when we brought Amy home, she threw up all over Mom, just like a puppy. You bring a puppy home and immediately poops in the corner. So we took Amy back then. There were no such thing as car seats. She was on Amy's lap, on Kay's lap, and she threw up all over Kay. I said, well, welcome to the family. So I think that you have to, I believe you should tell them that they're adopted right away, because I think it's too much of a shock to hear it from someone else, to hear it on the street or whatever. I think you should tell them. We did right away.
You went through a lot with Amy. You went through a lot.
I wonder if we hadn't told her. I wonder if we hadn't ever shared. I mean, it wouldn't have worked because we got Emily, and the whole story had to be, and Amy was with us when Donna picked up Emily, and we went through a lot. That was a challenge, and it's interesting. But I will tell you something I'm not proud of. This Amy's birthday was Valentine's Day, and this Valentine's Day, and 16 years, I guess, 16 years. And I went through Valentine the whole day, and I didn't think about it. The next day I woke up and I thought, oh my gosh, I didn't think about that yesterday. I didn't think about Amy on Valentine's Day. And once again, here you go. Do I have to feel guilty about that? I just have to feel about it, right? No question. September 26th is the day she died. I never forget that day. In fact, that's part of some of my passwords. The date of her death. Never ever forget that. So you move along, I guess.
You move along. And and you kind of think back on, regrets, joys. Should I have done this? Should we have done it?
So, the last time we took Amy to a care facility, we walked in, the three of us, Kay and Amy and I, and we sat down and we signed the papers, and she signed the paper, and we gave the guy the $5,000 check. And he said to her, your parents aren't getting this money back. You're here. You've been in a lot of places. This may be your last chance. Are you going to give it a go? She said yes. By the time we drove home, which was maybe 7 miles, she was gone.
Wow. In
the door, out the back door, and ended up in some place in the mountains in Arizona by hitching a ride with a truck driver.
Wow.
So,
Jean, this has been wonderful to talk to you. This is a Voices of Adoption. And sometimes those voices are full of joy. Sometimes those voices are full of pain. And you've got both. You've got both. And I think when we look at all the complexities in adoption, sometimes people go, I don't want to get involved in all that much complexity. Do you have regrets?
No, but I know what you're saying is the truth. I bet we've had 10 people who said they're going to be on our podcast, who the day of the podcast have backed out because they don't want anyone to hear it. Some people said, well, I can't say this because someone might be listening. They don't want to go through their experience of being the adoptee. And maybe that wasn't your question. Would I tell a couple that want to, I guess, Linda Ronstadt adopted kids. I said, if you want to tell an individual, if you're thinking about going for adoption, go for it. See if it works.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think you should. It worked for me. As much as we've had some discomfort and some sorrow, we've also had a lot of good times until she went off the deep end. Amy was terrific. Emily's just wonderful. I hope you get a chance to interview her. I hope you've reached out to her, and she'll have of course, a totally different story.
It would be fun to hear her story as well. We probably should have had you on together. It would be fun.
We do that on the podcast, but we have different feelings, and I think that would be good. Would be good for you.
Thank you so much for meeting with us. It's been a joy to be a part of your story.
Thanks for reaching out to me and having me, and I appreciate it, and I wish you well.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to Voices of Adoption. I'm Donna Pope.
And I'm Nathan William. Every voice in the adoption triad deserves to be heard and understood.
Visit voicesofadoption.org to subscribe and access additional resources. And then join us next time as we continue to build bridges through conversation.